My friend Brian and we were always adventurous, but within reason. Sure, we'd go into the woods behind our neighborhood, but never alone and always before dark. While kids who had experience in Boy Scouts were eager to find arrowheads or other artifacts from the distant past, I was more interested to see what kids just a generation ago had done in this space. Just across from the creek that ran through this area stood a large tree with the remnants of a treehouse. Who could have built it? Years later, when I was an adult, working in Silver Spring on a temp gig, I met a man who had grown up in Gaithersburg in the 1960s. He told me that it was all farmland back then, and that they would all get their water from a well. This was inconceivable to me. I remember seeing dairy farms when we first moved into the area in the early 90s, but those were replaced with housing or commercial buildings. Maybe it was him or one of his friends who braved the climb up that tree to hammer some planks and carve their initials into the wood. So and so loves such and such. Brian and I never built anything there, though. We dug a large hole near the creek, even managing to create steps of a sort. We didn't really have a reason to make this amateur bunker, but it seemed like the thing to do. Among my discoveries there were small deposits of clay and flat stones. I eventually figured out how I could skip them on the water. Brian was better at this than I was, though. He once managed to get one to roll on the surface of the stream. We usually had the place to ourselves, save for the odd duck or goose that would fly by sometimes. Now, what passed for the wilderness behind our houses? It was probably rather small, but to us, as kids, it seemed endless. We never went too far past the familiar parts for fear of getting lost. Of course, there were ticks and perhaps mosquitoes to fear, but that anxiety usually wore off once we got a little deeper into the green. It's funny to think that it was the terrestrial things that we worried about, rather than the far more dangerous aquatic environs. Still, where we felt safe, I liked to wade deeper and deeper, further and further into the water, making myself improvised waterproof gear with shopping bags and trash bags. They didn't work, and I'd often head back home, absolutely soaked and muddy. Now, I know that sounds miserable, but I look back on those times fondly.